The early life of William Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison was born on February 9, 1773, in the heart of Virginia, into a family deeply embedded in America's revolutionary past. His father, Benjamin Harrison V., had signed the Declaration of Independence, casting a long shadow of ambition and duty over his son. From the outset, William's life was one of promise, shaped by history and the weight of legacy. As a young boy, Harrison was immersed in the ideals of patriotism and public service. But his early years were marked not only by privilege but by a quiet, powerful determination. His education began at home, under the watchful eye of his mother, Elizabeth, and continued in the schools of Virginia. Yet, it was the vast wilderness around him that held his true fascination. This world, wild and untamed, would shape the man who would one day lead troops in battles and negotiate with fierce tribal leaders. In his early 20s, William left the comforts of his family's estate to attend Hampton-Sydney College. However, the call of duty was stronger than the lure of academia. At the age of 18, he joined the U.S. Army, eager to prove himself on the frontier. His first assignment took him to the Ohio Valley, where the nation's borders were in constant flux, and Native American tribes fiercely resisted encroachment on their lands. It was here, amid the dense forests and volatile tensions, that Harrison's character was forged. He rose quickly through the ranks, not by birthright, but through grit and a natural aptitude for leadership. Harrison's deep understanding of both the land and the people who lived on it gave him an edge as he navigated the complexities of frontier diplomacy. The young officer soon found himself not only engaged in combat, but also in negotiations with Native American leaders. His ability to balance these dual roles, warrior and diplomat, made him a figure of respect among his peers. By the early 1800s, Harrison had become the governor of the Indiana Territory. In this position, he faced the challenging task of maintaining peace and managing the encroaching tide of American settlers. But peace was an illusion in these troubled times. The Native American resistance was led by Tecumseh, a Shawnee chief whose vision of a united Confederacy threatened the future of American expansion. Harrison, ever the soldier, prepared for what seemed an inevitable clash. At the same time, however, the young governor's growing political ambitions began to shape his worldview. He understood that in order to secure a place in the history books, he would need to align his destiny with the nation's expansionist drive, a drive that would soon bring him face to face with the very forces that sought to defend the land of his native people. In this turbulent period, Harrison's early experiences as a soldier, diplomat, and leader laid the foundation for his future, not just as a military hero, but as a politician. His journey, marked by both struggle and triumph, was only beginning. It was a journey that would eventually lead him to become one of the most complex and enduring figures in American history. The Battle of Tippecanoe and its aftermath. The year was 1811, and tensions in the American frontier had reached a boiling point. In the wilds of the Indiana Territory, a charismatic Shawnee chief named Tecumseh was uniting a coalition of Native American tribes to resist the relentless encroachment of settlers onto their lands. His vision of a united Native American Confederacy was a direct challenge to American expansion, and it was a vision that William Henry Harrison, now the governor of the Indiana Territory, could not ignore. Harrison had already earned a reputation as a competent military leader, and his understanding of the Native American struggle gave him an edge in dealing with the volatile situation. He believed that peace could only be maintained through military strength and diplomacy. But as Tecumseh's coalition grew stronger, Harrison's attempts at negotiation faltered. The fragile peace that had existed between settlers and Native Americans was quickly crumbling, and war seemed inevitable. In the fall of 1811, Harrison led a force of nearly 1,000 men to confront Tecumseh's brother, the Prophet, who had been stirring up trouble at a site known as Prophetstown. This settlement, located on the banks of the Tippecanoe River, had become a stronghold for Tecumseh's growing movement. The prophet, who claimed to have divine visions, had rallied a large number of warriors who were ready to defend their land. The stage was set for a clash that would reverberate across the nation. On November 7th, Harrison's forces camped near Prophetstown, expecting a difficult but manageable encounter. What followed, however, was far more brutal than anyone had anticipated. In the early hours of the morning, the Native American warriors launched a surprise attack on Harrison's camp, catching his troops off guard. The battle that ensued was fierce and chaotic. Harrison's men, despite being outnumbered, held their ground, aided by their superior artillery and disciplined ranks. The fighting was brutal, but by the end of the day, Harrison's forces emerged victorious. The Prophet's warriors were driven back, and Prophetstown was burned to the ground. The Battle of Tippecanoe, though a clear victory for Harrison, was far from decisive. Tecumseh's Confederacy had not been defeated, and the broader conflict between Native Americans and settlers was far from over. Yet for Harrison, this victory was a critical moment in his life. In the aftermath, Harrison's reputation as a military leader was cemented. He became known as Old Tippecanoe, a title that would later serve him well in his presidential campaign. But the victory came at a cost. The battle had also made clear the immense challenges of managing the frontier and dealing with a population that was deeply divided on issues of land, power, and culture. Harrison's role in the battle marked him not only as a hero, but as a figure caught in the larger sweep of American expansion, a man whose personal fate was forever intertwined with the fate of the nation. The Battle of Tippecanoe had ended, but its repercussions would echo through Harrison's future. It was clear that this battle, though it secured his place in history, was only one chapter in a far larger story. Harrison's path forward would soon take him into the realm of politics, where his military triumphs would become the foundation for his quest for power and influence. Presidential campaign and the log cabin image. By the time William Henry Harrison set his sights on the White House, his military career had earned him a reputation as a national hero. The victory at Tippecanoe had secured his place in American history, and the public was captivated by his image as a brave soldier, a man of the frontier. But it was in the political arena, far from the battlefields of the past, where Harrison would face his most challenging fight yet, the campaign for the presidency. In 1840, the political climate in America was ripe for change. President Martin Van Buren's administration was struggling with economic turmoil, particularly the Panic of 1837, which had left the nation in financial disarray. The Whig Party saw an opportunity to capitalize on the growing discontent, and Harrison, at 67, was chosen as their candidate. His military victories and populist appeal seemed the perfect antidote to the economic hardships plaguing the country. But Harrison's political team knew that simply running on a record of military glory would not be enough. They needed to craft an image of Harrison that would resonate with the common people. In a stroke of political genius, the campaign embraced the image of Harrison as a humble man of the people. The narrative was set. Harrison was no aristocrat, no wealthy elite, but a man born in a log cabin, rising through sheer grit and determination. The slogan "Tippecanoe and Tyler too" became the rallying cry of Harrison's campaign, a reference to his military success and his running mate, John Tyler. This catchy phrase played into the populist sentiments of the time, emphasizing Harrison's roots as a man who had fought for the common American, rather than a career politician detached from the struggles of ordinary people. Harrison's opponents, including President Van Buren, tried to counter this image, mocking him as an old man, out of touch with modern issues. They scoffed at the idea of a log cabin president. But Harrison's campaign turned this mockery into a strength. The more his opponents derided him, the more Harrison's team emphasized his man-of-the-people persona. They plastered images of log cabins on campaign posters, served whiskey to voters at rallies, and emphasized Harrison's rugged frontier lifestyle. The campaign portrayed Harrison as a man who understood the hardships of the average American, while Van Buren was painted as an out-of-touch elitist, living in the comforts of the White House. As the election approached, the momentum for Harrison grew. The log cabin image captivated the public, and his message of hope and change resonated with a nation eager for relief from economic strife. On November 2, 1840, Harrison won the presidency in a decisive victory, securing 234 electoral votes to Van Buren's 60. It was a stunning defeat for the incumbent, and Harrison's victory marked the rise of a new kind of political campaign, one that relied not on policy, but on the creation of a relatable, populist image. Yet, as Harrison prepared to take office, he could not have known that the very image that had won him the presidency would also play a tragic role in his short tenure. Harrison's victory was only the beginning, but the challenges he would face as president, both personal and political, lay just ahead. The presidency and the tragic end. On March 4, 1841, William Henry Harrison was inaugurated as the 9th President of the United States. At 68, he had achieved what many thought impossible for a man of his age and background. rising from the battlefields of the frontier to the highest office in the land. His inauguration speech, delivered in a freezing rain, was the longest in U.S. history, a 3-hour address filled with lofty rhetoric about national unity and the promise of a bright future. Yet, as Harrison stood before the crowd, defying the cold with his vigor, little did anyone know that the very weather that had challenged his speech would soon challenge his health in ways he could never have imagined. Harrison's decision to give such a long speech, despite the harsh conditions, would become a defining moment in his presidency. The cold wind and damp air left him gravely ill within days. By the following week, Harrison had fallen victim to a severe fever and pneumonia. The man who had led troops into battle, who had endured countless hardships on the frontier, now found himself powerless against the most basic of human vulnerabilities. The illness rapidly consumed him, and Harrison's condition worsened by the day. His cabinet members and doctors, frantic and unsure, could only watch as the new president's strength drained away. His illness was swift, merciless, and unrelenting. On April 4th, just 31 days into his presidency, Harrison died, making him the shortest-serving president in American history.